Okay, look, thanks everyone for tuning into Business Bootcamp number 6, the best, I would say. We're talking today about nurturing talent for success and retention. Really lucky to have James Gage on the Zoom today. He's the L&D lead for North Star. So James, will you just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. I've been in the industry now for about 25 years, started like most of us as trainee consultants and worked my way up. I was a senior manager for one of the large corporate recruiters, managing a team of 13 across 8 offices. And, managing a team like that, a lot of time spent nurturing those people, and won some awards actually as a result, which was obviously very, very satisfying. But then I transitioned into learning development, and it's from there that I've really put a lot of that experience, I guess, into use, training other people's teams. So yeah, hopefully a lot of the experience from over that time I can share with you this afternoon.
Great stuff. Look, and it's really pertinent, I think, at the moment from the other events we've been doing, webinars we've been doing. People have been central to any of those. Even the Revenge of the Robots event that we had on Friday, there was a real conversation around tech's important, but if you haven't got the good people behind that, then it falls down. So I suppose focusing on nurturing your good people, James, why do you feel it's so important to be nurturing your teams currently?
Yeah, well, I think it's critical. I mean, firstly, as an industry, we don't have the greatest reputation for attrition rates, right? I think pre-pandemic levels were on average 43% in our industry, which clearly is not good. I've got to say something amazing has happened over the pandemic in the sense that we have kind of maintained our people a lot better than we have previously. I mean, for example, our business health check has suggested that on average about 30% is the attrition rate now. Some are better, some are worse. So that isn't bad. Now, the last probably 3-4 months, though, things have started to get worse again. And I think that's probably because it's got a bit tougher out there. Business is getting harder to get. And as a result, we may be putting a bit more pressure on our teams as well. And while some of those levers may not be regretted, I would argue that if you hire them, every lever is regretted. The time and the effort that you put into hiring those people in the first place and investing in them, you want to get some return on that investment. Yeah. So, if we do take that time, let's do what we can to nurture them a little bit more to try and get optimal productivity, which I'd say for most consultants is going to kick in probably after the 2-year stage, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. Certainly for my time at S3, we did a lot of measures around productivity. And yeah, I think it was 2.4 deals as an average once they passed that 2-year mark. So that was the challenge of skilling them, training them, and getting them to that point where they were really profitable. I think we were just talking off earlier, James, around your time and your title as head of gas. So, can you just share with people the story behind that? Because I think that's really pertinent for the market currently.
Yeah, of course. So during my time with the global recruiter, I was seconded to North America to head up internal recruitment and learning and development across Canada and the US. And it's at a time when the business was really expanding, so going through extensive growth plans. And I was given the unofficial job, it was unofficial job title of head of gas, I have to say. And it was because we had an attrition rate of around 50%, right? And that's with many people not even making it through their probation period. But the biggest challenge actually was losing people that 18 months to 2-year stage. So head of gas means give a shit, right? So my job was to give a damn about people and try and ultimately work out why the hell people were leaving, and to do what I could and what my team could to positively change that, to nurture our people and set them up for success and ultimately improve the profitability of the business. And that's what nurturing talent ultimately is going to do for you. And what we have to remember is that any departure from our business does have the potential to damage our brand as an employer and potentially make the challenge of hiring in the future even more difficult. So, in my opinion, Sean, every business needs a head of gas.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. Really like that. And you mentioned hiring, and I think in today's market where investment's really key, of when you make the investment, how you get that return on investment, hiring's got to be done right. So I think onboarding is a key part of any hiring process. So how do you feel the onboarding process should set the tone for people joining your business?
Yeah, I think it's huge actually, and there's different elements of onboarding. Just as a little precursor to that, by the way, I'm a big fan of when you're hiring for your team, get your team involved in that process. What I mean by that is what we can sometimes see is, why has my manager hired this loser? They're an idiot. Whereas if everyone's involved in that process, they're more likely to champion that individual and support that new recruit. So once you have offered someone and that offer's been accepted, don't assume they're going to turn up. Right? So let's look at pre-boarding to start with. So this really is where that first impression, when that journey starts, in my opinion. So you probably do this with your candidates, by the way, but do everything you can to keep in touch with that new employee throughout their notice period, to try and make sure there aren't any problems along the way. There's something called a psychological contract that is formed between a manager and their new recruit, and the new recruit and the manager. And if we can start trying to create that bond, even whilst they're working their notice period, it will really help. I might, for example, encourage them to meet the team during their notice period. I might send them out some branded goods with my company name on to their home address to get them feeling part of the team. I might even set them a bit of a research task, by the way, to maybe research the market that we recruit in. Everything we can to get that fire in their belly ignited ultimately, so they do actually turn up on day one. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. And when they have turned up on day one, I suppose, what would be your tips for onboarding them and setting them up for success?
Yeah, so the onboarding stage has got a couple of stages to it. First of all, I like to call it the company induction. So on that first day, they're probably feeling excited, they're probably feeling enthusiastic. I'd also suggest most people will be feeling a little bit nervous as well. So that kind of initial onboarding stage is really about first impressions. That first day, and you'll all remember this, I'm sure, is like a bit of a sensory overload. Everything's new, everything's different, everything's a bit daunting, new systems, everything. So try to make it a really soft landing and a really friendly landing. It's really about making that individual feel settled initially, comfortable, and likely to return for day two. So in other words, we want them to feel they have made the right decision. So I would make sure that there is time for every team member to meet your new recruit. I would suggest that there's a formal introduction with senior leadership. Take them on a tour around the premises, how to get in the building. What's the kitchen etiquette? Do I load the dishwasher myself, or is there someone to load it for me? Is there an employee handbook? Are there any other rules that are really important? But also really important, how do I get paid? I think it's a good opportunity to be clear on things like the commission or other bonuses straight away. In fact, one of the things that I found out in North America, I surveyed a lot of the early leavers to try and work out why they were leaving. And a high number of those people were not clear on how they could earn commission. Right. Now, for me, I felt that was an epic fail. I thought we'd really screwed up. Working in recruitment, we all know, is not an easy job. So it is so important that we can demonstrate how they will see the fruits of their labour ultimately. So that's the initial introduction to the company. From there, I'd say it's more about the job induction. What should they be doing? So let's get them up to speed really quickly in that job. Go through the job spec in detail. Don't shy away from setting expectations. Right? What do you expect from them immediately? And making sure there is appropriate training in place for them throughout their first probably 3 to 6 months. When it comes to that training, though, whatever that is, whether it's internal or external, I'm a big fan of only training people on what they need to know at that point. Yeah. So if you try and convert a complete rookie into a 360-degree recruiter too quickly, what happens is they just become overloaded and they are not going to remember everything that you've gone through with them. Yeah. So I had a particular client who asked me to deliver a 26-day training program within the first 6 to 8 weeks. Right. Now, obviously, obviously that could nicely line my pockets, but I'm not a big fan of that boot camp intense. Let's teach you everything all at once, and now you're just going to be a real expert. And interestingly, adults don't like learning that way either. So I'm a big fan of here's what you need to know now. Let's teach you that. Now go away and do it. Right? How are you getting on? You're doing really well. Brilliant. Let's now go on to the next thing and teach you that thing. And then you go away and do that thing. I don't know, Sean, are you a fan of Karate Kid? Mr. Miyagi? Probably too long ago, right?
I am, yeah. I like Mr. Miyagi.
So that's how he would teach the Karate Kid, right? It's the same principle, I think, to inducting a new recruit. What do you need to know now? Let's get you doing that now.
Makes sense. And look, clarity and structure, you know, for me, when I've brought people into the business at any level, like you mentioned about expectation setting, they want to be as clear as possible on what it is that they're expected to do. But I think structure is another big part of it. What's your experience on structure being important to a new recruit?
I think it's absolutely critical, actually, particularly for those first few months. Sometimes when I train managers, we look at different management styles. One of them is called the police officer, where you are absolutely setting the standard. And I think actually for a new recruit, particularly a rookie, I mean, especially, that is really key. So that might even go as far as this is what you're going to learn, but this is when you're going to learn it. So don't worry about that yet. That's coming in 2 months' time. I think structure is all about when are you going to sit down with them? When are you going to review their performance? It is about setting KPIs on week one. I mean, KPIs mean different things in different companies, but I mean, they should know what success looks like and what they should be working towards achieving straight away. I think you're in this industry, you do need a bit of pace, you do need a bit of purpose, right? So if we start nurturing those expected behaviors straight away, people will hopefully start to keep up with it. And I don't know about you, I think as an industry, some businesses have created a bit of a country club environment where we have been a bit more relaxed about things, probably because business has been better. But now I see companies wondering why the results aren't coming through. So from my experience, when my new recruits achieved the goals, the KPIs I set them each week, I felt it was a real nice opportunity to acknowledge the fact they have achieved it. Your daily setups, of course, can really help achieve that. People feel good about themselves if they're achieving good results, and therefore they're going to want to achieve even more good results. Feeling good is addictive, right? So I would strongly recommend that you do set your people up for success by creating that structure that you expect. And of course, at the end of their first week, take the time to sit down with them. How have they found it? How are they performing? Right? Any concerns you should certainly be sharing with them. Are there opportunities to really compliment them on their behaviours and what they have achieved that week? What I would say, though, is if you're doing that on a Friday, got to be a little bit cautious with negative feedback on a Friday. Right? Negative feedback on a Friday, it can ruin someone's weekend. And I've learned from that when my boss told me off for delivering very negative feedback on a Friday, but it might also stop someone coming back on the second week, right? So, something needs to be said throughout that first week, nip it in the bud, say it when it needs to be said. Yeah. But I'd also suggest with regards to structure, talk about career path. Don't shy away from doing that in the first couple of weeks as well.
Okay. I'll pick up on that point, James, if you don't mind, career path, because you mentioned earlier around commission, and that's a key driver for some people in recruitment. But more and more, the people I'm seeing coming into recruitment, career progression is really important to them. So, do you believe every business should have a clearly laid out career path?
Yeah, I do. And I don't know if any of you have seen some of the Simon Sinek videos. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. He was probably one of the first people who kind of got millennials and understood what motivated them. Yeah. And if we look at millennials and Gen Z, what we do know about them is they do want to get to the top of that career ladder like tomorrow. Right? So they are hungry to progress. So, if you show them that career path to get them motivated towards it, and of course, ideally talk about what they need to do to move up that ladder, it is going to motivate them. And keep those weekly review themes going, and making sure that that's following along with it. Yeah. So I'd say things like a 15-minute coaching session with every individual, making sure they are aligned with that targets and keeping on track with their career path is a great opportunity to instill that. Obviously, when you're doing maybe more quarterly reviews, they may be a little bit more detailed, a little bit more strategic. If they're doing business development, you might look at business development strategies, target clients, ways to break into those clients, candidate attraction strategies. But ultimately, if they achieve those things, they should be linked into their career path and then getting success at some point, certainly.
Yeah, makes sense. And one of the things we've actually been focusing on for Insight as a business is having different career routes that aren't just clearly management, because certainly people coming into the business these days, not everybody wants to be a manager. So yeah, it's making sure they're clearly aligned for different routes that people want to go down. We've got a lot of success. So giving them structure, making it clear what they need to do. We were talking still around nurturing being really important just at the start of this, and you mentioned something about the double bubble effect. So for anyone who might not have picked up on that, do you mind just explaining what that is and how nurturing your teams can give you that effect?
Yeah, what I mean by that is, when it comes to let's look at a new recruit, for example. When we look at inducting a new recruit into your business, it doesn't have to be you doing all of that, right? So think about, is there someone else in the business who could be involved in doing that, and not necessarily somebody who's got years and years of experience. So think about setting up something like a buddy scheme where you've got people who are settled into their job, they're performing well, they've got the right behaviors really critically, and they could maybe start to get involved in supporting you with inducting new recruits. Well, I mean, not necessarily everything, but little chunks of it. What you'll then find is you're killing two birds with one stone, because those individuals who are stepping up to take that responsibility, you're also nurturing them as well. Arguably, you're then nurturing future leaders, right? If they are people who want to move into people management roles, then brilliant. So for me, that's the double bubble, right? That is getting other people involved in developing the team. It could even be getting some of your experienced teams doing things like lunch and learns to the rest of the team. It's all about stepping up and taking responsibility. It shouldn't just be down to you.
Yeah. And it reinforces their learning as well, and reinforces, I've certainly found, getting more people involved in interviews, selling back why your business is a good place to work. Some subtle brainwashing going on there, I think, done in the right way.
You
Yeah.
could call it brainwashing, but yeah, whatever.
Well, look, we talked quite a bit about new recruits, and I think more and more this year, when I speak to other members in the Power Hive, there's been a big focus on recruiting experienced people. We need people who can come in and can impact the bottom line straight away. So I suppose what training, naturally, a lot of people tend to focus on the new recruits within their business. How about the nurturing side of things for your experienced people?
Yeah, in fact, interestingly, our business health check, that the survey respondents suggested that only around 55% of businesses, 55% of businesses have not developed their experienced team over the last 12 months. Yeah. So 55% respondents said we've not invested any training or development in our existing team. And for me, if I'm honest, I was really disappointed by that figure. And I was disappointed primarily because it has actually been quite a challenging year. If there's ever a time to invest in your existing team, it is now, when they really need that support. I think, and I know we were talking earlier, that our existing teams have had to adapt over the last year to a more challenging market. in particular, we mentioned business development skills, didn't we? Negotiation skills. All those really are key at the moment, and arguably they're a bit rusty for a lot of people because they just haven't had to do it. And in fact, some people that maybe been you hired within the last 2 years have never had to do it, right? So they are now in a bit of an awkward position. So if you feel that your business is needing to evolve, needing to maybe do more business development activity, I would certainly take the time to first conduct a training needs analysis. Where are the gaps? It could be your managers need help to become better sales leaders, for example. But you're right, we often put all of our efforts, all of our budgets into our newbies, and we do forget about our existing team. But actually, a little bit of support here can often have a bigger impact on the bottom line, right? Because they are the people, they hone their skills, they could really start to elevate. So that training needs analysis to work out where that support is needed, investing in the right areas, not just training for training's sake, makes a lot of sense. In fact, one of my clients allocates a budget to each of their employees, and it gives them the freedom over most of that budget to decide where they feel that money should be spent to invest in them. Yeah, so where am I not so strong? So it's really good to create that kind of learning culture, actually. The other thing just to bear in mind as well, if you are still operating very much a hybrid model, don't forget about those people working remotely as well. Just because someone is heads down, they're cracking on with their work, not calling you, not asking for help, it doesn't actually mean that everything is well. They may need some support as well. I was training some managers the other week actually, and one of the managers said to me that one of their team members who works remotely about 3 to 4 days a week actually said they were feeling very lonely. And God, what a horrible thing to hear. I mean, full respect for that individual for mentioning it, by the way, but how can we let that happen? But I think things have changed a little bit with hybrid since the start of the pandemic. When we were first forced into that remote working environment, I think we were very much engaging with our employees a lot more at that point. There was a survey that was completed actually by an organisation called Workle during COVID, and it was all about how much do you think your manager is developing you, right? And what was really interesting with the results is those people at that time who were working remotely felt they were being better developed than the people who were working in the office. So a bit strange. And you think, well, why is that? Well, I think the reason behind that was managers were intentionally having check-ins with those people. They were doing it on a regular basis via Teams, via Zoom, whether it was daily, whatever. And that quality time that individual had with their manager, they could ask them questions, they could bounce ideas, they could maybe gather feedback. And I think those individuals felt they were really being nurtured at that time, whereas the people in the office were just, crack on. But I do think productivity this year, but I know productivity this year has dropped for remote workers. So, there was an action plan for all of you. If you have a remote team, just think about how you can nurture those people. How much time are you actually spending simply checking in with people when they're working remotely? I mean, everybody, to be honest, but especially those who are working remotely. But I think generally with more experienced people, I kind of digressed a bit there. There's a really big word here, and it's empowerment or delegation. Right? How can we empower our experienced people more to take more responsibility? And Harvard Business School, which is a great organisation to follow, by the way, to get some tips and tricks on leadership, they revealed the number one thing that engages people is having interesting work. Interesting work. And I think that's quite tough at times, actually. I think sometimes elements of this job get quite tedious. So, there's one way to maybe uncover some hidden talents is, can you maybe delegate a project or some additional responsibilities to a member of your team? Potentially even parts of your job that you enjoy, by the way. So it could be, I'm not saying you enjoy this, but it could be running a team meeting. It could be being the CRM champion, the new business lead, inducting new recruits, as we said earlier. Maybe the social secretary, if you've got somebody who's very social, maybe the social media content creator, the market insight lead, whatever it is, allow people to take responsibility by delegation. And you guys, I'm sure, have got a very full to-do list. What I'd encourage you to do is think about what is your to-don't list. What actually could you give to other people to do? Yeah.
Makes sense. And look, that the key element for pretty much every Hive meeting that we have is time as a leader is really crucial. So, like you say, then on the flip side of that, being able to actually use some of the resources that are around you is going to empower them and make them feel more invested. So that's really helpful. Thinking about that, your resources then you've got across the office. We talked at the start of this around that 2-year mark being the critical point when people are going to be consistent, going to be earning you money. They tend to be the people that get left alone because you think, oh, they know what they're doing over there. I'm going to put the fires out over here. What tips can you share with people around how you can nurture and retain those people at that critical 18 to 24 month point?
Yeah, they're also the ones that like you to get headhunted, by the way. Yeah. How many of you like people who've got 18 months, 2 years of experience in the industry? Right? It's true, isn't it? So, in fact, one of the things I was able to implement in North America to alleviate that glut of 18-month, 2-year departures was actually completely free. And it was simply tapping people on the shoulder and saying, yeah, we really think you've got potential. Right? Not everyone, obviously, but if you are seeing the right behaviors in people, if you're identifying people who you feel could be future team leaders, maybe future business managers to go out and win more business, maybe future heads of talent, whatever that happens to be, tell them. Absolutely tell them, because people at this stage will, in theory, leave your business for a new job title, right? If they've got a more senior job title somewhere else, that might be something that does attract them. But if you believe they are on the right trajectory, tell them. Get them to understand that. Get them to show that you do believe in them, and they are more likely to stay. Of course, this is when we double back to that career path, right? So if you start talking again about the next step for them at that career path, making sure they have got targets to achieve that, I think you're more likely to retain them and more likely to keep them ultimately. I really do.
Brilliant. Thanks. You mentioned around the management team specifically, and if we're talking around delegating and growing teams out, management team is as important as new recruits or experienced people. So what about nurturing your management team? Have you got any tips or advice, or how has that been approached in the businesses you work with?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Don't forget your managers, and don't forget you, by the way, too. It's a tough job managing people. It's also a tough job leading a business, right? So, one thing, again, we've noticed since the start of the pandemic is the role of being a people manager has definitely changed. I think it's a lot more pastoral, if you like, than perhaps it previously was. And I think employees almost have a greater expectation of you as their leaders too, which is hard. So I think some of the key skills which managers really need today is things like how can they coach? So coaching skills, how can they delegate? How can they empower their teams more? How can they manage performance? Right? And how can they hold people accountable? I think there's a lot of that right now. You're setting objectives and people aren't achieving it. How can we hold them accountable? How can we drive them through to actually achieving those things? If you've got a management team in your business, actually, do they get together as a peer group and bounce ideas off each other and work together collaboratively? I think even encouraging that is a really good thing to do. And I mentioned earlier about sales management. That is important to your business right now. Do your managers know how to be effective sales managers? Because the last 2 years we haven't really had to do it. So it's really key. And that delegation, whether that's you delegating to your managers or your managers delegating your team, that's a really key point too. Having the trust to actually get one of your team members working on their own on a particular task, I think is really important. And one of the real key tips around delegation is eyes on, but hands off, right? So what I mean by that is you want to set up some reporting timescales or maybe catch up sessions, but you don't want to meddle on what that person's doing. So if you set up a project for maybe one of your managers, or your manager set up a project for one of their teams, and let's say it's to be finished by the end of January, it would be dangerous to just leave them alone at the end of January to say, so did you do it? Have you done it? Oh, no. Well, that's disappointing, isn't it? We don't want to do that. But maybe a weekly check-in or a bi-weekly check-in. How are you getting on? Show me where you're up to. How's it going? Any challenges? Anything I can help you with? Gives you an opportunity, hopefully, to go, great work. I can really see you're on track, right? So delegation is a really key lesson or a really key skill, I think, for good managers and management teams to have. That your proper nurturing of the individuals within their team is also about that individual having the freedom to come up with their own ideas and their own solutions to execute that project. You may perhaps prescribe the end result, this is what it needs to look like, but try and give that individual some freedom to work out how to get there, albeit with your consent perhaps along the way.
Makes
That
sense.
makes sense?
Yeah, brilliant. Look, we have had some questions in from the webinar, James. So we've got 4 or 5 questions before we finish off with your top tips, takeaways, if that's okay. So I think one of them picked up on accountability here. So we're talking around, how do we hold people accountable in the current climate, particularly if the KPIs haven't always been in place. So I think what this question's getting at, there's clearly been some environments where KPIs haven't need to be as rigid, let's say, and as the market's turned, they've had to backtrack and hold people a little bit more accountable. So how do you balance that accountability without going full micromanagement role and losing your good people?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say don't be afraid to reset the standards. All right, at any point, you can say we now need to change the way we're working. Right, this isn't working, and this is why. So we do need to reset those standards. That's absolutely fine to do. I think one of the key things to getting people accountable and bought in is to get them involved, just the reasoning behind it. And if you can, ask them how they think they can achieve it. This is something we need to drive through. This is why we need to drive it. This is why we need to be doing it. But how do you think you can do it? What are the ways that you think you can implement this? What are the activities that work for you? KPIs is a bit of a swear word sometimes, isn't it, Sean? I prefer personal success metrics. So for me as a consultant, I always found that I wasn't particularly good at getting closing on the phone. But if I got to meet the client, I was a lot better at closing that client and getting them to work with me, getting exclusivity, whatever. So my manager identified that and tasked me on getting 12 meetings a month. And he knew that if I met 12 clients per month, I was likely to get enough business to keep me going. So for me, the calls were less important, albeit the cause was part of the process to get the meetings, but they became less important. So if you can get the individual to understand how they can achieve those new goals, those new standards that you're setting, and then do it their way, I think you'll get more buy-in. But the accountability piece, there's got to be a review date on when they need to achieve it by. And if they haven't achieved it, don't be afraid to express your disappointment. You may want to come up with consequences. I'm not saying you want to do that immediately, but if somebody's continually underperforming, that can't be allowed to continue.
Yeah, makes sense.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, look, it's the personalisation and element of it you mentioned, James, is important.
I think so.
If anyone likes that blanket approach to KPIs or management, everyone's got the same target. So that's really helpful. The other question here was around identifying future managers in your business. So, how do you identify the competencies of future managers? In my experience, they're not always the top billers of the team. So what's your advice?
Yeah. So I think you're spot on with that, by the way. And you're the best people managers in your business do not need to be the best billers. They need to be the best at creating the best billers. So for me, it's all about the behaviors. Are they cross-selling? Are they passing on leads for other people? Are they showing an interest in other people? Are they getting involved in inducting new recruits? Are they somebody who says, look, I've got a meeting with this client. Do you want to come on it too? Because it might be beneficial to you. Are they seeing the wider business picture? And do they give a damn about other people? Then they're probably going to be the right people, leaders moving forward. And I'm not writing off people who are not like that, by the way. Those people could be really good at driving through, your sales strategies if they are so focused on the fees all the time and the billing. Yeah.
Would they be part of Team Gas? Might be the question.
Okay. Yeah. If they are part of Team Gas,
yeah.
right, then they're probably be good people managers, in my opinion, with the right help and support.
That one, James. You should trademark
I should.
Last question is around style of training. I think the question talks about now with a lot more video and media and things being a lot more interactive. What are you finding in terms of the delivery styles of training is most engaging for salespeople?
Not video, unfortunately, which is a shame because it's normally cheaper. It's easier to tap into. You can watch it whenever you want. But actually, I think people zoom out very quickly when they're watching videos. So even if you're doing a 30-minute session at lunchtime, do it round a table in person and keep it high impact, relevant, so people can then go away and actually do it back on the job. And I think whatever training you do with your team, whether it is something you do yourself, whether it is involving an external trainer or your internal training team, you still have a part to play. For example, let's say they're doing a course on, I don't know, job qualification. Have each of the individuals in your team thought about what they want to get out of that training? Do they know where they're good at qualifying jobs? Do they know where they're not so good at qualifying jobs? Discuss it with them. Give them your input. Do you notice that actually when you send CVs over to a lot of your clients, you struggle to then get feedback on those CVs? So that should be one of your objectives this training session, right? So if you get each individual learning where they should be focusing on, and then after the training, whether it's run by you or anybody else, embedding those learns afterwards. So what did you get out of the training? How are you going to change what you're doing then to put that into practice? How are you changing your style to accommodate these new learns? And keeping those messages going is really key. It's got to become a habit. Any new bit of learning has got to become a habit. And it's hard for that to happen unless that individual is so super focused without the manager reinstilling that, keeping the themes going.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you, James. Look, a minute left. So on that note, I'll just ask you to wrap up if you don't mind, James. What would be key takeaways for people to take away and implement into their business on nurturing talent?
Yeah, okay. Well, I got kind of 10 key points really. So first of all, I'd advise all of you to take the time to pre-board, onboard, and induct everyone into your business. Have a structured plan for that, but involving other people from your team. So it shouldn't just be down to you. What's the saying? It takes a village to raise a child, right? That principle in the workplace too. Second point, train in small, digestible chunks, focusing on what they need to be successful now, not in 3 months' time, right? Number 3, don't hold back from setting the standards in terms of behaviors and activity that you expect. So set KPIs, whatever you want to call them, from the get-go, right? Get them used to being managed in that way. Point number 4, definitely give feedback as soon as you noticed anything that needs feeding back on, right? Give feedback, don't shy away, but do avoid that negative feedback on a Friday. Point number 5, ensure you've got a career path in place and make people aware of how they can move up. You'll engage them more, they'll feel invested in. Number 6, look for opportunities to celebrate success, any success, and people want more of that. They'll love the accolade, they'll feel good, they'll want more. Point number 7, if you spotted talent in your team, tell them, right? Make them feel like you want them there for the long haul. Point number 8, getting the team involved in developing the team creates double bubble. So you will develop those doing the developing too, whether it's a lunch and learn, inducting new recruit, whatever. Number 9, training needs analysis. Conduct a training needs analysis to ensure your experienced people aren't feeling underinvested in. Maybe even set up a a development budget per head if that's appropriate for your business. And number 10, don't forget about you, and don't forget about your management team. It's your management, is your management at the standard that people expect? And are your sales managers aware of how to get the best results from their team? So that's important too.
Brilliant, James.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Time.
Thanks for your time. Right in time. Lots to take away there, both for the Hive members, but certainly I've been making notes for my business as well, James. So brilliant. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.